Hudson Valley, New York man used sophisticated schemes to rob drug dealers. And so, this article. Alright, so this type of article, like, and situation, like, fits into kind of the stuff that the cop gang does. And that it includes FBI agents sometimes, okay, in an area. See, in this area, some places some places have a little more. Okay, so they have informants that also do drug dealing, and that then amongst that informant group, some people will be tasked on stealing like money from drug dealers, because essentially the informants are like, they're extremely blackmailed, and the cop gang allows them to exist in the world without going to prison, as long as they do what they say. So the whole idea is that stealing money and stuff from drug dealers, that is kind of sometimes that money usually pushes into the informants, are usually in a side S&M or tech club, and that they rip off drug dealers sometimes, and they sell drugs to put money in the whole S&M's group fund that they all live off of. This person was like tracking with an Apple Watch. See, they use informants in two ways. One is they take skims off of what they steal, and if they have enough hackers that are smart enough to like not be using regular ClearNet kind of devices and stuff, then those people continue to exist. But this type of situation, if they were using a regular Apple Watch, then those are people that pretty much they know what they're doing. A lot of the times the informants kind of have to do it the more clandestine, I guess, the more sophisticated, the more hidden they are about it, the more they're allowed to exist, because they still push skims at the cop gang. They give skims off of their thefts and drug deals and stuff. But if they start using if they were using a regular Apple Watch or something, then that's the kind of stuff where those people pretty much don't have the subversive ability that a lot of other informant groups have. And so with that, they basically, if they stumble across something like $500,000 to seize, they'll be ripping off people. Little small, 10,000 here, 5,000 here. But then if they stumble across a group that has like $500,000, if they're not able to rip that stuff off in like a really sophisticated hacker way, and that's usually where FBI super cuckers, which will be like a part of it, they usually come in and they usually bust everything. They seize the money, they seize the drugs, and then the FBI gets a big bust. And the bigger busts, usually cop gang pushes big seizures at the metros, at the FBI, at the DEA. They do. And that then that's kind of where the informant groups are meant to be also groups to bust. That's how they work in two ways. Essentially, they're allowed to exist for a while, and they usually bust them at the end or after some time frame. Or if they stumble across a drug group that has $500,000, that would be a guarantee. That type of stuff. The amount of money they have is where they bust the informant team to seize it to seem like the police force is being effective. Basically, they run a service of inoculation. So essentially, once an area starts to pay them all the time, anybody that has a lot of money in a drug way becomes the only people that get busted because everybody's just paying cop gang, and then nobody really gets busted. But when people start if you pay the drug gang, you can start to really gather a lot of money. Once you gather a lot of money, then they bust you. That would be like where this drug cartel guy here in Tri-Cities, and then they busted him. All right, and so that's essentially the kind of things that would be. That's the basic structure of a lot of what they do. And so, like I say, when Mormon Club takes over the hookup site, then essentially they start to have more busts to make the area seem like it's like being normal and effective. Because a lot of what happens when the cops start taking control of the hookup site, that's also it's like a silent Silk Road, online. And that it starts to be where the cops just start taking inoculation service fees, and then nobody really gets busted. And really, I mean, this is really what it is. So when the Mormon Twilight Club basically takes over the 50, they'll notice the anomaly of lack of busts. And then they start structuring busts of people that are getting inoculation fees from the police officers. All right? And it's like, in lots of ways, they have caveman. I explained caveman theory. In lots of ways, they're not necessarily that smart. But after a while, when Mormon Twilight Club takes over, they usually have like people that analyze how dumb the cops are being. And then they start placing in structured busts so that it doesn't, in ways, an area that has a lack of arrests and stuff like that. People are always doing crime. There should be no lack of arrests. And that essentially the Mormon Twilight Club, they'll notice they'll already know all this stuff. Like I say, they're a part of it, the whole thing. But that they'll attempt to add a normality, because when you start to run your area in like these cop ways, it really drops off arrests. And so then as long as it kind of brings a red flag in ways, And so then the Mormons who start skimming off the whole process, they attempt to add normality back to the police area so that they can maintain pulling skims off of everything. I mean, that's the real reason why they do that. See, it's like everybody's real paranoid. So everybody thinks X, Y, Z in the future and shit like that, okay? So the Mormon Club or the Mormon Twilight Club, they do that too. They, part of what their whole theoretical leadership takeover is to add normality back to everything. And that includes like limiting the inoculation to bigger busts like this so that the area has news articles of tough on crime. I mean, because like I say, after a while they'll start to lack busts and people will be still running because the drug running, you bust one person and somebody just replaces, so it never really ends. So that is kind of like where this article is pretty much like where more than likely the FBI potential in this article, this is a potential like article of what I'm talking about. Potentially the FBI group that would have busted it all would have been a part of it around here, would have been a part of it for sure. For sure. Would have been, it would have been it would, it's a team run pedo bang mission. I mean, around here, this situation would have never happened without being pushed through deputy gang, okay? They would have never been able to bust anybody with $500,000 and a bunch of drugs and stuff without it being part of one of these set up entrapments. It's like just would never happen. It would have to run through the dark web cop gang, basically, to be able to bust $500,000. The FBI would have never been able to seize $500,000 around here without being run through the cop gang. That's just what it is. And so that is kind of where, that is basically where I suspect that, like I say, these exist, these deputy gangs, they exist all over the United States. They include FBI fuck clubbing to the top, FBI super cuck. I mean, they all run out of like in an S&M way. See, they're like little factions. And that most of the time people are seeing like right now the banditos and executioners are highlighted or whatever. Soldiers. Who's the leader? You know, like this Mexican cartel guy. He's got a leader. He's down in Mexico or Colombia or something. Who's the leader of a cop gang? It's usually a round table. Police captain, mayor, a sheriff, local, whoever the highest ranking person in the FBI in the region is. I mean, they end up being the leaders. It ends up being like a people sometimes. So that's where sometimes this is why I scan news for stuff like this. Because nowadays it's like for $500 you can probably get a group of dumb fat tech nerds that tell you exactly how to do crime.